At the local gas station, donuts cost 50 cents each, and each bag of chips is $2. You have exactly $15 to spend and plan to spend it all on junk food. Write an equation in standard form modeling this situation. So in this scenario, we're actually already told that we're going to write the equation in standard form. So you don't even have to, you can ignore this. But just in case you weren't sure before it was given to you, typically when you have a scenario like this, where you're trying to find out exactly how many of two different types of things you're going to purchase or how many of different types of tickets, these are usually indicators that you're writing an equation for something that is not going to be slope-intercept form. And in this case, it would be standard form. You don't immediately see a rate of change or a slope, and you don't immediately see an initial amount or a starting amount or a y-intercept. So this is going to be in standard form. So let's go ahead and figure out our two variables. What are we trying to determine here? We already know the total cost, so we don't need to worry about that. What we do need to determine is the number of donuts. So I'm going to just go ahead and say D for donuts, number of donuts. We don't know how many donuts we're going to buy. And then we also want to know the number of bags of chips. So I'm going to go ahead and just say number of chips, which means number of bags of chips. Okay, when we're writing an equation in standard form, we know that it's going to look something like this. Okay, so I'm actually using D and C instead of the X and Y, but we can still use those variables and write something in standard form. So let's talk about what we know here. We know the cost of one donut. So if the cost of one donut is 50 cents, and we don't know the number of donuts, but we determined that we were going to call that D, I'm going to start my equation with 0.50D plus, we know the cost of a bag of chips is $2. We don't know how many chips we're buying, but we picked the variable C to stand for number of chips. So plus $2 times C equals, and we know the total amount of money we're going to spend is $15. So again, you can use any variable that you want as long as you identify and name the variables, or you can go ahead and just use X and Y. But if you use X and Y, you've got to make sure you label which is which. So if this was the case, I would say that X stands for donuts, number of donuts, and Y stands for number of chips. Okay. So now let's go ahead and answer some questions using this equation that we have written. And I like to go ahead and just use those variables D and C. Okay, so just to rewrite it from the previous page, it was 0.5D plus 2C equals 15, where D stands for number of donuts and C stands for number of bag of chips. Here's my first question. If you plan to buy exactly 4 bags of chips, how many donuts can you buy? And we're going to ignore tax in these two examples. So what are we given here? We're given the information about chips. So I know that C is going to equal 4. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug that number into the equation. And I'm going to solve for D because I'm trying to figure out how many donuts I can buy. 0.5 times D plus 2 times C, but instead of writing C, I'm plugging in the 4. 2 times 4 equals 15. And now I'm going to solve this equation and isolate the variable D to figure out the number of donuts. So 0.5D plus 8 equals 15. I'm going to subtract the 8 from both sides. 8 minus 8 is 0. 15 minus 8 is 7. So now I have 0.5d, that's supposed to be an equal sign, by the way, is equal to 7. I'm going to use inverse operations, which means I'm going to divide both sides by 0.5. 0.5 divided by 0.5 is equal to 1. So that isolates the d. And then 7 divided by 0.5 is equal to 14. So that means if you buy exactly 4 bags of chips, you have enough money to buy 14 donuts if you're not taking tax into account. So now we're going to do the reverse of that. Now we're given the number of donuts and we're going to calculate the number of bags of chips. So this time it says if you buy exactly 6 donuts, so that's D equals 6, we're going to solve for C. So using this same equation, 0.5, except now I'm substituting in a number for D, 1/2 times 6 plus 2C equals, I still have $15 to spend. 1/2 times 6 is equal to 3, plus 2C equals 15. Now I'm going to solve this two-step equation by subtracting both sides by 3. I get 2C equals 12, and I'm going to use inverse operations, which means I'm going to divide both sides by 2, and I get C is equal to 6. So if I buy 6 donuts, I should be able to buy 6 bags of chips. Now, I'm nervous that I didn't do this right. So again, I always encourage you to check your work. So I'm just going to plug it in, this value for C, and make sure it checks. So 0.5 times 6 plus 2 times 6 is hopefully going to equal 15. 0.5 times 6 is 3, plus 2 times 6, which is 12. 15 does equal 15, so it does check.